Hello, good morning, and welcome to the show. This is the Weekly Jargon. I am Jose Rodriguez.
And Rohi Zachariah.
And together we are the Jargoneers. We are absent Abel, but we hope to see him soon. Otherwise, we're going to talk about some interesting topic today, right? We did see over this past week the tensions that did rise between Israel and Iran, or Iran. And it looks like this could be a spark to World War III.
Yeah.
Your thoughts, Rohi?
You know what? I will start with. I do find it interesting now, in the sense of the art of war. You know, so much of this because of the reporting, how much notice we give each other, how much almost like diplomacy there is. Like, you know, it feels like in World War II was. Okay, we just drop bombs and, you know, we just blow up whatever we think is strategic. Where now it's like, hey, Jose, in like 20 minutes, I'm going to send a rocket your way, get everybody out of the way, and then they fire it off, and obviously, you know, it lands where it lands. It's kind of odd to see if it was truly about hurting one another, right? Like we're supposed to believe these two countries are at bitter ends, like they just want to annihilate each other, but Iran, even in its, you know, it's, if you want to call them craziness, they're still saying, hey, Israel, by the way, we're going to bomb this place. Hey, we're going to send a rocket over here.
Yeah.
Like who does that? You know, I mean, I'm very confused by that strategy.
And maybe those are the part of the rules of engagement, right? When you're going to get into war. I think at some point, even in the World War, I recall seeing that there were certain rules of engagement, right?
There is.
And what you can use, shotguns, for example. My understanding was that at time, you know, shotguns were not, because they were harder to fix, right? I mean, especially if you have a shotgun coming through your body, well, then how am I going to pick this guy up and get him set, right? So, and I'm sure with that, I mean, I think it helps. You know, the aftermath of what we see is typically what's depicted on TV, right? We see blown up buildings, we see young children being picked up in certain pieces sometimes, and sometimes you see graphic pictures or videos of how they want to shape your mind, right? Even though, to your point, they will say, hey, within 3 hours, we're probably going to hit this target. So if you have any civilians there, please move out of the way.
Yeah.
I don't know to what extent, Rohi, but that's what I'm assuming is being said across both of these rivals.
Yeah.
And the ugly part of it is that there's war, that we have to utilize certain weapons. And these are weapons of mass destruction because they do destruct a lot of things. And typically it's going after, in the case that we're listening to the news and the outlets of the media, is that it's more of the nuclear sites that they want to destroy because they have the potential to create some type of enrichment that will create nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
I think that is the threat that the Western powers has. Obviously, a threat to who? Is it a threat to Israel or a threat to the U.S.?
Well, and that's that. So that argument is where I guess, you know, when people are more educated, it gets more difficult because, you know, Israel, for one, he's very critical, saying that nobody should have these things, that Iran shouldn't be able to build them. But the nuclear treaties that we have in place says Israel's not supposed to have one either, and they have nuclear weapons. You know, so there's already violations in place that says, hey, wait a minute, you say they can't, and you're not supposed to either, but you do. You know, so when you get into a lot of that, it's not very equal. You know, we're not very defined on who can and who can't when it comes to nuclear weapons, and that is the concern because obviously, I think their argument is always, you know, if Iran's more likely to push the button or destabilize to where somebody may have control of those things, but I don't think that's ever really shown to be the case. I mean, again, like I said, like look at this all-out brawl, and we still have formalities. You know, I mean, if they were as terroristic as they want to be, you know, portrayed as, they would just be pushing the buttons and blowing up city, you know, streets and killing civilians as a focus, not, hey, we're gonna take out some place in the middle of nowhere right now.
Yeah, and I, you know, and it's funny because, like you said, I think when the rules or laws are made out, especially in the international game or international wars, who typically writes those laws and who puts those sanctions and what have you, right?
Yeah.
And typically, I mean, we see it. It's the more powerful countries, right? In this case, at one time, I think England did its own. In the way they colonized and they set their goals and ambitious goals alongside these other countries that they colonized. But the U.S. has become the global power. So therefore, when it comes to engagement, rules, and sanctions, it's mainly the U.S. Yes, you're gonna have allies, but it's not like Iran says, "Hey, you know what? I don't think that's fair. I'm gonna take it to the Court of Appeals and counter that because that's not correct based on this."
Yeah.
And being that maybe Israel has a lot of support from the U.S., then they can carry out these attacks that you see. Obviously, those are attacks that spark up wars, right?
Yeah.
And today's modern wars, I don't know what that war looks like, though. I mean, yes, maybe destroying certain sites with trying to limit the amount of casualties to civilian casualties. But I think it's more of like destroying that economic juice that you have, whether it's nuclear, whether it's your military, or these specific sites that they know are very important to your economy.
Yeah.
Right? It could be refineries, whatever it is that you have a value and can destroy you. Look at the sanctions they did on Russia, for example, right? I mean, because of Ukraine, right? And we don't talk about that now, but that meant that, hey, we want most of the world to stop dealing with Russia.
Yeah.
And how's that going, by the way? I mean, interesting that we set these rules, and to some degree, maybe in the American eye, we see it as, yeah, let's get it done, and we're having to put these sanctions on. But on the back end, I mean, you don't think that there is companies within the U.S. that are still doing business like usual.
Yeah. Well, and again, if we're talking about rules, but in the early stages of this war, Israel is very open that they went and killed their nuclear scientists of Iran. They went in and were assassinating generals. And, it's like that where everybody just says like, oh, okay, great. Nobody stepped in and said, wait a minute, how are you going to another person's country, openly saying you're assassinating people that haven't really done anything, and then, be confused, why are they bombing us, Like, if the U.S., and I'm sure the U.S. does this, I mean, that's why we have like the CIA and the DEA and all these different groups that like sneak into countries and they've been doing this since I think like the 70s and stuff about, doing coups and, assassinating presidents and whatever. But
proxy wars.
Yeah, but we do it secretly. And this one, it's not. It's, hey, champion, hey, we went in and we killed all these guys and, almost obviously to show a threat, to kind of say like we can kill you when we want to kind of mentality, but everybody's okay with it. Nobody's saying like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. No, you can't do that. Because if it was the reverse, if Iran had come in and assassinated any of their scientists, I'm sure the world would have been on fire. How could you cross borders and how could you do these things? But it's okay on this hand. That's yeah. And I mean, I know it's not to take one side or the other. It's just to say that again, this formality should be in place that says you can't do it. And then we bombed a nuclear site, and the next story comes out how, I was reading this morning how, Israel was already there inspecting the site. So wait a minute, you're in their country already. Like you're on the ground. Like how is that acceptable?
Yeah.
You can't be crossing that border.
Well, I think when you see expansion, I mean, this is exactly what takes place. It's systematic and it's strategic, and they know the vulnerabilities of every country. So when they're backed by a country such as U.S., I think that certainly changes, like the changes the playing field, right? It's very loaded on one side. It says, hey, well, we know that the armament that the U.S. has, and combined with the Israeli government or military, it exceeds by far what we have. We may be able to, swell up for a minute, throw missiles here and there, but at the end of the day, do you have the long game?
Yeah.
And I think, when looking at the armament that the U.S. has, sending certain naval ships, sending fighter jets and what have you, I think, that's your biggest weapon. And now the technology, which is even bigger, attacks, cyber attacks, the intelligence of really understanding how the internet, how you can compromise their systems.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to look at it. Well, who invented that? How did that come about? Who were the pioneers of bringing such a intranet or internet capabilities of communication? And it was all developed over war. And those that have the higher intelligence are going to have the upper hand when it comes to that. So I think it really isn't a equal playing field. So I think these events take place, again, like you said. I think it's very, it's common to say, heads up, here we come. But I mean, what we see in the eyes of what we see throughout the media and what the media feeds us, it's a little different. And again, my opinion, Rohi, and I'm sure yours, is based on what we read and what we see. But again, that's being fed through a certain channel that they want you to have. It's not like I'm getting it directly from Iran, and I'm certainly not getting it directly from Israel. So the opinion that's shaped for me is, well, I mean, there's more of this loaded content coming this way. So therefore, it draws my opinion or draws the shape of the way I think based on what I'm seeing. Now, the smarter person will say, well, wait a minute. We know that this is loaded. So don't always take what's being fed to you. It's always good to have a neutral position, take in the information, find out what's on the other end, and then make a good judgment. But too many of the times, we don't have time for that. We got so much stuff going on here now, the immigration, the raids, MAGA, all these other things that are taking place here. It's almost like you're having to you're confusing people. Well, here we are.
Distracting. It's not confusing. Distracting.
You're distracting people. But on the bigger scale, you got war unfolding in different areas of the world. And again, like I said, I think, who is it good for? Is it good for us as Americans while we're facing our own wars here? I mean, it seems like we can't seem to clean up our own mess here that we have. We have a lot of issues at hand. When you look at homelessness, when you look at this beautiful bill that's about to get passed, obviously, and it has a lot of different things in there that could potentially cut away a lot of the services that certain folks depend on, Medicaid, for example, right? But then again, you have a lot of spending in military, you have a lot of spending in other really big business. I mean, I'm talking about the biggest business corporations out there that may inherit a lot more money than what you think. And at the other, it's a trickle-down effect is what they call it. Well, if they get it, then we all get crumbs of it, right? And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess we have to accept or adopt that. And I'm not too crazy about that philosophy because we've seen it in the past. And have we grown? To some extent, but not to the point where the way you paint that picture.
I think if there's two sides to it. I think if the news or the media, whoever you want to say, was to report today on everything, meaning you have obviously the Iran or Israeli war, you got what's going on in Palestine, you got what's going over in the Ukraine, Russia, you got the riots that we're having here. I think if on a single day you covered how that is still going on, when we say when's World War III, you would say it's right now. Like obviously everybody has a fight going on, therefore we already are there. Yes, maybe we're not in the superpower battle that of like Russia and China and all the majors, but there's a war going on right now in every part of the world. But to say why is that happening? Is it distraction? Is it to take away? Like why are they not like Ukraine? You don't even hear about it anymore, right? It's kind of I'm sure they're still throwing bombs or killing each other or doing whatever they've been doing for the last year or 2 years now. It's still going on, but we're not talking about it. Just like you're talking about this new plan to be pushed. They're not. It's being covered up, right? Because I'm sure they don't want a whole lot of attention to it, right? They want to pass it. They want to get it going through, and most Americans do not even know what's in place, right? Because like you said, there's going to be some benefits to a lot of people. A lot of things are going to be cut. There's going to be unhappiness with it. But if we can distract people and say, hey, look over here. Look what's going on. Hey, missiles are going on, and be worried about that. Don't worry about what's going on over here.
I think what I see and what it
because I don't see the news covering a lot of
what it signifies for us here locally. I mean, a lot of us may say, well, that doesn't really impact me. Well, maybe in a bigger scale it does not. But let's look at it like in a micro scale, right? Because we just had our opening ceremony for this hospital here. right? Maybe about a week or two ago. And, looking at the people that were there, the investment that was done to bring this hospital back, knowing that we're fighting an uphill when it comes to the reimbursements of, Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal gets about 60% of its funding from Medicaid. So that just goes to tell you what kind of an impact that could have, this beautiful bill could have, if Medicaid is cut to a certain extent where, it doesn't make it to California with the expected funding that, the levels of funding. So by not having that funding, California then has to do its own cuts, and they have to push back on the on that funding source.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for us here locally? I mean, we had to borrow close to $50 million to get this operational. This is one of the distressed hospitals in California.
Yeah.
Distressed because it couldn't keep up with the expenses.
That's like if you were to look at this in a different industry, like if you look at it at food, right? If the subsidies weren't there in the food industry, as far as the farming and everything, you couldn't afford your food today, right? Like you couldn't actually afford to pay the labor that goes into picking that tomato or that strawberry. It'd be too expensive. But the government subsidizes it to make it affordable to you. That should be somewhat the plan today, not say, and I know it's kind of there in a grand scheme, but to say that it costs too much for you to go get a shot at the hospital. No, it should be subsidized to such a point to where that shot is affordable to you, but you pay for it, not the government pays for it. But of course, I know even in the food, we have the food stamp, and we have there's programs that help those that can't even afford even to that degree. But to come in and just say like, hey, look, you know what, that Tylenol that you just got, it's $3,000. No, it's not. It doesn't cost me $3,000 to come get that Tylenol.
But it does.
No,
it does. And I'm not saying
it does. But I'm saying but we do that because we know we need. It's a critical something that you need. You need medical care, just like I need to be able to eat tomorrow. But we don't say, hey, that box of cereal is now $50 because that's actually what it costs to make it and box it and ship it and get it on your plate. We say, wait a minute, we'll subsidize the product. We'll subsidize everything that goes into it. We'll subsidize the gas so that you can buy it for $7.
Yeah, and in a way, Rohi, believe it or not, I feel that to an extent, most of the businesses, and I say most of the bigger businesses, have some type of agreement or some type of contract with government.
Yeah, you have to.
Right? You talked about whether it's farming. Obviously there's subsidies with crop insurance. There are subsidies with certain crops, specialty crops.
Yeah.
We're not highlighting that because that's not new. It's
Sure.
been around, and that's what farmers have lived off. We look at the mortgage industry, right? We have a VA, we have FHA. We look at, how is it that most Americans can afford their homes now? Well, there's government backing, right? There's mortgage insurance that you pay for. But again, no bank in their rightful mind would say, go ahead and take this mortgage out knowing that you're going to pay me back. No, they want a government-backed assurance that, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
So that's what FHA has created. But again, what I'm trying to get at is that if you look at the amount of subsidy the word subsidy has now a negative connotation because typically when you say subsidy, you always revert back to those, well, that's welfare. Oh, that's going to be the food stamps, whatever you want to call it. But look, the word welfare, what does that mean? Welfare.
Yeah.
For the well-being of folks, of your community, right? Yeah. So welfare has become a negative word nowadays because nobody wants to utilize. So they'll use different words to hide its meaning, whether they're called subsidies, whether they call credits.
Yeah.
Call it what you want. At the end of the day, it's the government there building up this amount of money to go to certain groups. And you talked about like the pharmaceutical, for example, Tylenol. We allow that. We as a government have allowed for these particular giants and corporations to be able to take advantage of that. Because if I come to you, Rohi, and you are running for a certain office, Rohi, and I need your support in this bill that's going to help me keep my Tylenol brand to be the only brand, exclusive brand that can be sold in these hospitals, then I want you to support that. And you're going to tell me that you are because I'm going to give you $500,000 or whatever the case may be. Now, isn't that another way of, I hate to say the word bribe, but couldn't you necessarily I know it's called a contribution, but if someone gives you a contribution of that size, would you not feel compelled to be very loyal to that corporation or that entity or that private organization? If that was your only financial support, it's hard not to. Let's just say it's hard not to, right? Although you have the right moral values, it's hard not to do that. And that's the same thing when it comes to these wars that sometimes take place. Who funds your campaign to be able to side with me, to be okay for me to say, let's go ahead and execute this type of behavior?
But I mean, again, but it and I know there's give and take, like all this stuff. There's no perfect win, but it still goes back to, like with something like this hospital here. It's a private hospital. Yes, it gets government funding, but it's a private entity. It's capitalism at its best, or at least it should be capitalism at its best, meaning that it should be able to charge what it wants to. It should be able to make money. It should be able to run it itself. But you're seeing that model is failing. So there are certain industries that are going to require, I don't say you're socialistic, but like that government hand that kind of says that, maybe you can't survive. The cost of doing business is just too great to do it by yourself. You need more subsidies. And like you said, like the Medicaid and all the reimbursements that you would typically get, that's kind of why our hospital struggled, is because they weren't getting the reimbursements that they needed. But that's a failed program then. That should be one of those things that comes in and says, this is how you're making your money, and this is your group that you are doing business with. You should be flourishing because that's who you're doing business with. But yet, almost to say like it was intended to make us fail, we got the worst rates. We didn't get as much money as we needed to, and they were bleeding money towards the end and kind of had to go bankrupt like they did. But my point is that there should be a better mechanism in place to say that if we're so concerned, like you can tell from your voice, you're so concerned about the well-being medically of people, right? We can't take Medicaid or Medicare or all these things away. Well, can we? Can we take it away, but take that money and just give it to those industries that are actually providing the service, right? Like say, like you don't get benefits, Jose, directly, but when you go to that hospital, it's already free. We're taking that dollar amount and we're just going to make it free. But if you don't go to the hospital, it's okay. We're just going to take that amount and we're going to give it as a collective, right? Because I think that's, maybe the bigger part of it is to say maybe it's just, kind of, we say like the insurance industry, right? Like we're all paying $1,000 a month for insurance, but there's probably one guy that's actually using it right now, so we're actually collectively paying for that person, right? And we're hoping he's going to pay for us when I need it. Like I think that model may be what's necessary in a sense of the medical industry, to just say like, hey, you pay in, you get a little bit taken out, which I know you do right now, but your medical care, it's just free. It's just covered. I just don't. I know it's something we could probably afford.
Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting concept, Rohi. I think that if it was laid out in that way, where
well, they're doing. I mean, like there's insurance companies. They're Christian based, but they're Christian based insurance companies that are essentially modeled in that idea that we all. What we're doing, but I think on a more we're creating that pool. We're putting our money in, and we're knowing that we're not probably going to use it, but we're still covered. But Jose's going to use it. And Jose's bills are going to be covered, right? But I'm going to keep putting in, and hopefully when I go to need it, it's going to be there. Now it's maybe scary as a Ponzi scheme mentality, because maybe Jose gets his coverage and then decides, I got my surgery I needed. I'm no longer going to pay into it. So there's not going to be maybe that money when I need it. But I think that's, something that I'd like to say on a personal scale push for, because I know at some point if you have enough in your little bank account, you don't really need to put more money into that insurance. I mean, thinking over the years, how much money I paid towards insurance, like, as my parents paid it, and as I became an adult and got a job and was paying for insurance, and to think like, I use it like 2-3 times in my entire life. that, probably like not even 1 year's worth of payments I've ever used in my entire lifetime, and the rest of it went elsewhere.
Yeah.
It went to fund somebody else.
No, and that's, I mean, that seems like a very promising concept. If it was,
Sorry, the coffee's kicking in.
No,
so.
no. I mean, I think it's a very promising concept if it was something that we can implement to the benefit of the community. Because I think one of the other things you see, and I think the CEO there had mentioned this, is that when you have your private insurance, that's not a Medi-Cal or some. I mean, we don't necessarily use it here. Mm-hmm. We go seek doctors in Fresno, for example, right? Kaiser or Fresno Regional,
sure.
Or whatever other hospitals out there, because maybe the level of service. It could be the level of service, or it could be just the fact that, hey, I just don't like Madera, mm-hmm. right? But I mean, again, the more folks that take their private insurance elsewhere, obviously that it's like your taxes, right? I mean, we have biggest employers are going to be your public agencies, like your school,
yeah.
your city, and your county. But the majority of recipients of that of their medical benefits probably don't come here, and they utilize them, for example, because you have options, right? I mean, imagine if you pushed all that here, and the level of service was here, because now you're paying more, they're receiving more of your private insurance. They're able to fund. It's like any other business, right?
Yeah.
If you bring your money here, then this could grow potentially to be a very top-notch service provider. But again, they rely heavily on subsidized medical payments, right, or reimbursements, and that's what makes it tough. Also, I mean, it's a region that or a community that has seen a drop in how these levels of funding are placed, right?
Yeah.
And for us, I think you see when you look at the median income in Madera, and you start comparing that to healthcare costs, and it's tough. It is tough. I mean, you're going to have a subsidy. So to implement a plan of what you're saying, I don't think it's hard to do. I just feel like more and more people need to get involved in that, right? And the fact that you have choices, right? We have choices, then we that's the American way, is we have choices. We can go here, we can go there, or we have to stay here if you have an HMO, a PPO, or whatever kind of healthcare program you have.
But I think it's baked into like the Social Security. I mean, if the idea, we covered it in one of the episodes already, but if the idea is, if at birth we can take a chunk of like $10,000 and let it through interest accrue up to your age of 55, 65, whatever that's going to accrue, and that be your retirement, and already know that it's going to be enough for retirement, that you don't actually have to put any more in. You don't have to do anything. Maybe you got to pay that $10,000 the government gave you as soon as you get your first job so that they can recoup that money. But to think of, like, again, that on a grand scale, just to kind of say, maybe it's the same idea. Maybe knowing that you're going to need health insurance more as you age, maybe the government puts an extra $10,000 in at birth and lets that accrue, and you can pull from that pool as you need it for your medical. But nothing more has to be put in, right? And then obviously, like Social Security, where, you get it at 65, but you died at 62, and guess what? All that money just went back into the system. I'm sure over time you would see, yes, the maybe ups and downs as somebody uses more of that healthcare money versus all the people that probably will not use it. Sure, maybe it'll balance out, but I just feel like those pools as a whole, they get to a point to where just through interest alone, they're just self-sufficient and just growing naturally.
Well, you sound like there's a lot of like a social movement being pushed here, Rohi.
There is. I think it is.
I mean,
but I think that's the wrong word. It's self-sufficiency. It's just self-sufficient programs.
Again, I think when you have, and that's the government being involved, right? So when the government is involved in helping you or helping its collective,
they'll just make it illegal because they don't like it.
People don't like to hear that word, right? But I mean, I think that's where the fight is. We talked about World War III. Those are the actual wars that are happening today, bro. It's not just what's taking place with the nuclear sites being bombed, or Israel and Iran, Ukraine and Russia, China in the mix now. Mm-hmm. I mean, we talk about World War III. Shoot, man, we're having a war of our own here. Yeah. And it's hard sometimes to contemplate how we can get out of this when we have so many issues at the same time that it's hard to really, you have to pick one. you have to pick one and say, well, I'm going to stick to this one here today because I think this is important for my community.
Yeah.
Now, how important is the war on Israel and Iran? I don't know how important it is to local people here. It could be to those that have family on both ends, but more importantly, economically, how does it impact us?
It's going to be good. I mean, war is always good. It always is a money generator.
Somebody always profits from the war. Whether there's oil or resources, I mean, is it cheaper for us? I mean, and you look at what's taking place now. Just the other day, somebody had asked the Fed chair, Powell, hey, with all this stuff that's taking place, some lady from Miami was asking him, you start seeing these raids happening, people being deported and what have you. What does that do to the economy? Well, actually, it slows it down. It slows it down. And maybe that is the target. Maybe that is the intention, is to slow the economy down because this runaway inflation can get pretty bad. So by removing people, I mean, you got to remember that when during the 1930s, President Roosevelt had to take extreme measures to try to get us out of a depression, right? And he had to do certain things to get us out. Now, I'm not saying this administration is doing that, but I mean, there's got to be something in correlation to how we want to slow this economy down, right?
Well, there's only 3 ways to get rid of people, and we've seen the third one. But the first one is war, because you send people to go die in a war, and you kill them by the thousands and hundreds of thousands, right? Or you have COVID happen, which maybe it was man-made to alleviate some of the population of this world. Or 3, you just deport them all together. So I mean, I think we're just happening to see the trifecta of how do you manage population control and the economy and all this. This is the third leg of it. It's just saying, look, like you said, like America is on a runaway train. We have to slow this down. Let's pull the people that we know that we can't out because we don't have a war, so we can't go send off 100,000 people to go fight somewhere and die. So this is the next best, and we don't have maybe another COVID around the corner that's ready to go. So
and I think the humane part of it, and although you may get arguments on this or not, is just how it's being unfolded, and I think how it's traumatizing for certain communities, especially here in California. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with what powers the federal government has because I think that's spelled out in the Constitution. It's when you violate those powers, because even with powers, people were very cautious about how the government should proceed.
He muted me. I know you don't hear me. Yeah. There you go. Now I'm back on.
There you go. So how the government proceeds in executing those powers, right? There is that's why when this Constitution was created, they were very careful in how they wrote it. Even the language itself was very specific in how they wrote it because they wanted to make sure that above all, the rights of its citizens, or at that time, mainly landowners, were not violated by the government because they had just come from a tyrant king, and that's what they didn't want. They didn't want the same thing to happen. And what has unfolded in previous established governments before them that preceded them. And today, I feel like we are in a very in an environment that's very hostile. That protesters are up and running. The Romans always said, when the mob is hungry and you don't have grain, you're done.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a group of senators and there's an emperor, and that's it. Yeah, you're going to have the guards and the military, but even the military, if you can't feed them and you can't feed the people, then essentially that's how revolutions typically start, and that's what they feared the most. And one thing that we established is government similar to that. We have a similar structure. They had a republic 2,000 years ago. We have a republic today. And it consists of senators, consists of presidents. You can call them emperors, call them what you have, but they were representative of the republic at the time. Here you have a House of Representatives to try to bring checks and balances. You have a judicial branch to try to bring checks and balances. And when those 3 are compromised, that's an issue that we should be worried about. So with that, Rohi, we're running into 35 minutes now. World War III. I mean, I think when we talk about that, we'd like to make sure that we highlight that it's not so much a war about rockets and tanks, but rather on what's taking place globally, nationally, and even here locally.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add before we
Just to add that when asking, my Jarvis over here, he says it's very unlikely that the World War III is around the corner. So
just like the magic 8 ball, we now use AI.
Yes.
And with AI, we ask it some questions, and some of those questions are, hey, are we going to war based on the circumstances that you see? And according to AI, it states that.
I think he says we're over worried about it, but it's unlikely at this point. So
there you go.
There you go.
So if you're worried, trust AI. That's another war we have to talk about at some point. Anyways, thanks again for watching. We look forward to seeing you next week. If you have any comments, please like, share, subscribe. We'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thank you again.